What's up, DS3 TV? We are back for another video, and this one is When Shakespeare Got Cool. This was recommended to me by a subscriber, and yeah, let's get into the video. And this should be probably a pretty good one because yeah, Shakespeare literally has been spoken about for at least five. Because I would say I forgot when he like was writing. I think it was either 12. I always forget. It's either 12 in 1200s or 1400s. But yeah, I think it was one of those time periods. But yeah, he's been around for a very long time, and people have always remembered to talk about him. So that's kind of interesting. Recently more so than in recent history, more so than older times like the 1600s and stuff like that. But yeah, so let's get into it. I've never heard of this channel before, but yeah, let's get into it. And I'm excited to check out a new channel and see what does the channel have to say about When Shakespeare Got Cool, because yeah, that should be an interesting thing to see. And also subscribe to the channel. Want to get down subscribers by my birthday, September 13th. Thank you guys for 881 subscribers. And yeah, let's get into the video.
We've all been there. You're 15, sitting in English class and picking at a fresh pimple when you're sent.
That man just scoped the freak. Wait, no, go back. I want you to go back. Wait a minute. That man had an arm.
We've all been there. You're 15, sitting in English class.
He aimed that so good, and that was like, wow, okay. I didn't expect to see somebody get beamed by a paper ball. Like, wow, I didn't expect that in the first, 5 seconds. Because, yeah, that's insane. Alright, I just had to talk about that.
And picking at a fresh pimple when your centuries-old English teacher careens into the classroom steering a dusty 400-pound TV VCR combo card from some bygone era. While she struggles to put on...
Do kids still have that now? Because I remember those, but, yeah, they went out of style after I think we stopped using them after smart boards became the way to watch things and stuff like that. So I mean, do people still have those? Yeah, because I haven't seen those in a very long time actually. That brought me back to elementary school.
Zeffirelli's 1968 adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, experiencing a myriad of predictable issues that even your boomer parents have the techno-literacy to decipher, the class lets out a collective groan. Well, at least now I don't have to read the book, Cody whispers from 2 rows back.
Haha, you're wrong. You always have to read the book. You have to watch the movie and read the book. It's always like that.
Right. You'll be spark-notesing it later. But for now, your class will have to sit through hours of dubbed crying and hoity-toity dialogue, barely registering a...
Fun fact, I only watched a part of the older Romeo and Juliet because for some reason we didn't watch the full version. Maybe we got had some snow days that happened, but yeah, we didn't watch that full older version. And I think, yeah, my senior year was when we watched, yeah, it was senior year where we was an AP, when I was in AP literature or whatever, and I watched, what was it? Yeah, we watched, what was that movie called? I can't think of the name. It was, it wasn't Romeo and Juliet, it was it was around that time period though. I just can't think of the name. But basically that's what it was based off of. I can't think of the name because it really did can't think of it, and it's like, you know, something's like on the tip of your tongue, and you really can't think of it. Really does suck. But yeah, let's just get back into it.
Syllable of William's signature iambic pentameter as you distractedly whisper to your friends and take extra long bathroom breaks. For teens, Shakespeare was, and may likely always be, a drag. But why is this the case? Why is Shakespeare so notoriously boring? Is it possible that today's youth have simply aged out of the bard? Well, not entirely.
A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife. The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage.
I just remembered what it was. It wasn't Romeo and Juliet. It was another one of Shakespeare's plays. But the movie was called She's the Man. I forgot what it was like supposed to like loosely be based on, but because I remember one of the characters was Capulet. You know what? Never mind. I'm just gonna go back. Sorry. I'm just gonna go back to it, but yeah, She's the Man. That was I mean, it wasn't bad. It was good for the time. Like it's a pretty funny movie to watch. But yeah.
For years, we've come to associate Shakespeare with what scholars like to call high culture, those objects and works associated with the upper classes, things society has deemed to have aesthetic value. Works of high culture belong to this category for the reason that they're inaccessible to the masses. But the thing is, Shakespeare didn't originally exist in the high culture category. In fact, the concept itself is a fairly new one in the realm.
I mean, Shakespeare, he was supposed to be for well, most of his plays were made for middle class, well, high class and middle class when he was alive.
Of modernity. Since Shakespeare's death, his plays have undergone a process of cultural elevation. During his time, the live performances of Shakespeare's plays were produced for audiences of all classes. The Globe Theatre, home to his own acting troupe, consisted.
I mean, yeah, but basically, like, in his plays, he usually had, like, it wasn't people that were, like, commoners that the play would be around, that the play would be, like, based around. That's what I meant to say about that. Like, yeah, people of all classes came to his plays, which was a first for people of any time period, because before that, it used to only be rich people that would go to plays. But still during his time, they would, like, that's why you see like Romeo and Juliet, like they weren't like common people. They were still of a high ranking class. It's just that they were of two families that didn't get along together. You know, like they couldn't, like they didn't want them to, you know, to be together at all. So yeah, it was definitely still a classist system. I mean, like it still is today, but the plays were more classist too, because you wouldn't see a play on a poor person. That wouldn't have happened.
Consisted of gallery seats reserved for the educated genteel folk, as well as a section called the pit, reserved for the rowdy masses, or groundlings as they called them, who would pay a penny each to stand and watch their favorite plays. The floor in this area was often covered with hay to trap the smells, as drunken guests would urinate openly as they heckled the performers and laughed at fart jokes. If that gives you any indication of the ambiance down there. This intermingled space for high and low classes can largely be attributed to Queen Elizabeth I's lifelong patronage of the arts and her desire to bring entertainment to all of her subjects. It wasn't until 1623, 7 years after Shakespeare's death, that his works were elevated.
So I was wrong, yeah, 1600s. My fault. I don't know why I thought it was like 1400s, but yeah, still. Yeah, his work has been around for a very long time.
elevated to a more esteemed and arguably less accessible status. This was the year that his works were amalgamated and published into a collected edition called the First Folio. This collected works, bound in expensive calfskin material, cost £1 each, which was a small fortune at the time, putting it within the reach of only the wealthiest of people. Thus, according to Douglas Lanier, the conversion of Shakespeare's performative text to literary print removed Shakespeare from a social space where immediate, irrational bodily pleasures, political and social fractiousness held sway. Now he could be engaged rationally and dispassionately, experienced within a domestic space. It allowed Shakespeare to be separated from association with the unruly elements of popular culture. Into the Victorian era, Shakespeare's works were considered to be lessons in virtue, teaching young people how to become more literate and educate themselves in the ways of Victorian social mores. Even the theater, which was once a common ground for all of society, had now become a place for passive, respectful spectatorship, where conduct was heavily regulated to the polite decorum of the genteel classes.
The measure done, I'll watch her place it stand, and touching hers make blessed my rude hand.
Now, we've been adapting Shakespeare's works for the big screen since the inception of cinema, with the earliest known example being an 1899 silent film version of King John. But while these adaptations were widely produced during the first half of the 20th century, they were often bogged down by their mission of staying true to the text, making them appear more like plays rather than fully realized products of their medium. Especially when applied in educational environments today, these films can often feel stuffy and restrictive, encompassing all the calculated elements of high culture Shakespeare without any of the ephemerality, vulgarity, or uninhibited fun of live Elizabethan-era performances. And film adaptations would remain this way, with a few exceptions, until the latter half of the century, an era in arts and literature that scholars would refer to as postmodernism. No one can really agree about when postmodernism began, when it ended, or if it should be called postmodernism at all, but the long and short of it is that postmodernism is... Let me see.
I mean, as you do, go to Google.
It's a reaction against the ideas and values of modernism, the previous period which upheld the virtues of universal truth, idealism, and reason. And postmodernism met them instead with an emphasis on irony, skepticism, and subjectivity. Much of postmodernist theory is concerned with the effects of late capitalism, how hyperconsumerism and mass media have turned everything into signs and symbols, fragments of their former wholes, and most importantly, how this collapsed the boundaries between high and low culture. What postmodern art produces is tongue-in-cheek,
McDonald's is everything.
self-aware, disjointed, and pastiche, meaning it replicates older well-known works and ironically distorts them. While it's often difficult to locate a postmodern work because of its broad and frequently disagreed upon definition, the changes that this movement made to Shakespeare on film are actually super clear. Now, for the scope and purposes of this video and the fact that there are 420 Shakespeare adaptations in total, I'm only going to be focusing on adaptations from the mid-90s to the early 2000s. This is because, I argue, the first film to fully usher Shakespeare into the postmodern age is none other than Baz Luhrmann's 1996 adaptation, Romeo plus Juliet.
When maids lie on their backs, that presses them and learns them fight.
Yep, and I remember watching this too. They had for us, they had us watch the older one and the newer one. Like the older one, the first one. Yeah, I only like the one that I only saw like half of. Yeah, so they were trying to like alternate it, where we would see the new one day, then the old one the other day. They did that until I guess they got bored of going back to the older film, and they just decided to just finish the new one, and we didn't even go back to the older film at all. So yeah, I have watched this one in full, but yeah, that's it.
Bear making them women of good courage. This is she. This is she.
While Franco Zeffirelli and Kenneth Branagh dominated the 1960s and 80s respectively with their authentic retellings of Shakespeare plays, often set believably in the Elizabethan time or another era of the distant past, this style became less profitable as we entered the postmodern period. A combination of cultural moods, artistic movements, and a proliferation of media led us to the exact moment where Baz Luhrmann, camp extraordinaire, was able to create the most bizarre, decontextualized, kitschy adaptation put to screen. Now, I'm not gonna lie. As a former thespian and die-hard fan of the Zeffirelli version, I used to hate this movie. But as time moves on, I've had to come to terms with the fact that this, and this is probably the most pretentious thing I will ever say on camera, is a postmodern masterpiece. You have Leo with his Hawaiian Prada shirt, the Verona Beach setting, gaudy religious iconography, MTV pop songs, elements of drag culture, campy acting, and absolutely cuckoo bananas editing. Luhrmann also inserts pieces of...
Honestly, yeah. I understand like what she means by that too, because yeah, like when I first saw both of them, like how we were like alternating, I always had thought that the original was the better one, but yeah. I mean, this one, yeah, it's actually a masterpiece. I could say that when it comes to like what it did for popularizing Shakespearean. But,
Shakespeare's text all over the place, in signage, in advertisements, in newspapers, on buses. It's a postmodernist's wet dream. Perhaps the greatest lover of this movie was Luhrmann himself, saying, "We have not shied away from clashing low comedy with high tragedy, which is the style of the play, for it's the low comedy that allows you to embrace the very high emotions of the tragedy." In other words, Romeo plus Juliet is a stark blend of high and low culture. The language of the text is preserved, with some helpful alterations.
My heart loved till now, forswear its sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night.
And we see self-aware elements of Elizabethan sensibilities. Leo in his knight's costume, the ornate architecture of the Capulet mansion, but it's seamlessly fused with lowbrow humor and nods to the 90s punk scene. And as you would expect, many critics hated it. Gary Crowdis said Luhrmann was more concerned about concocting a visual style that will pander to the tastes of young moviegoers, thus reaching the artistic level of a good high school presentation. My king, Roger Ebert...
wow, that's terrible. I would say that's terrible. Just considered your masterpiece movie a high school presentation.
called the film one grand but doomed gesture that will A, dismay any lover of Shakespeare, and B, bore anyone lured into the theater by promise of gang wars, MTV style. Even Franco Zeffirelli, who directed the prevailing 1968 traditional adaptation of Romeo and Juliet with Olivia Hussey and Leonard Whiting, hated Luhrmann's interpretation. He said,
"Yeah, that's I believe. I'm trying to think. Yeah, the original version was actually better." And yeah, I don't know. I didn't like when I first seen it. I just didn't like the new version. So I mean, you know, feelings change over time about certain movies too. So because you just realize, you know, how, you know, much of the time and the culture it was too. So yeah.
The Luhrmann film didn't update the play, it just made a big joke out of it. But apparently, the pseudo-culture of young people today wouldn't have digested the play unless you dressed it up that way, with all those fun and game. But you know, he might actually be onto something here. If postmodernism made high culture and low culture indistinguishable from one another, what do we have left to look down upon? And there it is. Young people. Youth culture is the new low culture. Since around the 50s, marketeers have known that young people are the most important consumers. If you can get to the youth, you can shape popular opinion and therefore drive sales. And filmmakers of the 90s saw the direction that people like Luhrmann were taking, despite the critical performance of their films, and said, you know, there could be an opportunity here. And thus, the gates were opened on a tidal wave of low-culture Shakespeare adaptations in the late 90s and early 2000s.
There's the movie. Amanda Bynes, she's the man. Yep. I remember when we watched that movie in class. That was a good movie.
Now, Shakespeare was fully immersed in pop culture.
And when I mean an actual good, and when I mean good movie, I don't mean an actual good movie. It's you gotta remember I have a movie review channel. Honestly, it would be a great movie to review. Honestly, it's a it's a pretty funny movie.
Culture, to the point where his works are almost unrecognizable to the untrained eye. This late 90s, early 2000s boom resulted in two types of films. The first being melodramas that were obvious modernized renditions of Shakespeare's great tragedies. We had O, a 2001 version of Othello starring Mekhi Phifer as Odin James, a star basketball player and only black student at a prestigious private school. There was Hamlet in 2000 starring Ethan Hawke in the titular role and heir to the Denmark Corporation. And Romeo Must Die, a Jet Li action movie also released in 2000 and starring teen pop idol Aaliyah. The latter two being so incredibly Y2K that it's kind of hard not to laugh at their outdated sincerity.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them.
Man, who remembers Blockbuster? I remember I used to have a game subscription with Blockbuster because it was they would because I at first I used GameFly when I was a kid, but then I switched to Blockbuster because the shipping time was quicker. Because it used to take I think it would take a month for you to get a game from GameFly if it was a new and popping game, and Blockbuster, it would be would it take maybe a week? And I was like, oh wow, that's amazing, a week or two. And I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. I can get this game quicker. So I was happy to get a subscription with them and stuff. That was cool. But yeah, I don't know. I have very fond memories of Blockbuster. I wish they were still more around. It's only one around now though. And I think what is it, Oregon? But yeah.
To die. To sleep. No more.
On the other side of this were youth culture adaptations of Shakespeare's comedies, or what I like to call Shakespeare, the high school years. These ones you're probably more familiar with. In 1999, we got Get Over It, a Miramax produced.
I do actually, out of those old movies too, I do remember Othello, and I do remember, I'm trying to think, how much did I see of Romeo Must Die? Maybe a little bit. Because I'm trying to think I might have seen a little bit of Romeo Must Die.
High School Musical take on A Midsummer's Night Dream, starring Kirsten Dunst and a whole slew of other big names. Never Been Kissed, a Drew Barrymore vehicle very, very loosely based on As You Like It, and 10 Things I Hate About You, a high school version of Taming of the Shrew, starring Julia Stiles in her third contemporary Shakespeare film, and perhaps the most well-known of the three. Joining these a few years later was She's the Man in 2005, based on Twelfth Night, and quite possibly Amanda Bynes' best.
That's what it was, 12th Night. I remember, because yeah, we read the story, we read the play in class, and everybody had different roles and stuff like that. Then we seen the movie, and it was it was pretty good, honestly. That's why I said it was pretty good, but definitely it had early 2000s elements that make it funny to watch now, because it's something that could only exist in the 2000s. I feel I don't know, the early 2000s. It's perfect.
Best work.
Hey!
Hey! What up?
Now, these weren't like Romeo plus Juliet at all, in that they completely abandoned Shakespeare's text and even many of the plot elements to fully submerge us in a contemporary experience. What we're left with is the scaffolding of a Shakespeare play. The costumes and script are contemporized, with brief moments of Shakespearean dialogue integrated quite seamlessly.
What group is she in?
You don't even think about a group? Bianca Stratford, she's a soft.
I burn, I pine, I perish.
Of course you do.
These movies are also less stylized than Romeo plus Juliet, framed instead in the likeness of a John Hughes movie, following teens as they navigate the absurdity of high school and fall into fickle romances. And hey, this formula worked. While these films may not have had critical success, with critics calling
Ooh, that those ratings are not the best ratings.
She's the Man a comedy that lacks both the verbal sophistication of its source and the sexual sophistication of its target audience. Or one overwhelmingly sarcastic review of Get Over It saying, Shakespeare probably made the point best. Teens rule, parents drool. Critics actually kind of proved our disdain for low culture, despite whatever advancements were made by postmodernism. For many critics, the only way a film could be delightfully Shakespearean in the late 20th and early 20th century, it had to be completely venerative of his works, like a Kenneth Branagh film, or at least carefully toe the line between veneration and irreverence. As Emma French puts it, the contained subversion of Hollywood's irreverent, lighthearted, and postmodern filmed Shakespeare adaptations serves to perpetuate Shakespeare's role as universal educator and timeless high culture symbol. Small instances of irreverence may reinforce the audience's desire for an authentic text, a sacred original capable of imparting timeless knowledge in spite of what modern adaptations do to the text. But when it comes down to it, which of these films has lasted in our collective memory? I can honestly say that while I appreciate the artistry and jubilation of Much Ado About Nothing, 10 Things I Hate About You will forever have a close place in my heart.
Yeah, same thing with me. Like, I feel like She's the Man probably will have a close place in my heart for the most part, because it's like, yeah, it's a film I definitely remember, and we like, I think we watched it more than once. We watched it like twice, like 2 or 3 times in class. So yeah, it was like it was a film I really did like, and it was, it was pretty good. I gotta say, it was pretty good.
As Robert L. York astutely points out, audience and critical misconceptions abound regarding a preconceived notion that production should be historically correct, actually a 19th century convention, while Shakespeare's own audience would have been exposed to costumes of their own period, not of the play's setting. It goes to show that while critics, select audiences, and theatre snobs like my former self reserve Shakespeare to his high culture status, we can't deny that film as a medium, much like original Elizabethan theatre, is meant to be consumed by the masses. As postmodernism taught us, it's impossible to escape pop culture, and we shouldn't necessarily want to. Young people will continue to study Shakespeare's texts in school.
I can't get past that this man, like, it's just, he has such the arm and accuracy. Like, I don't know how are you, like, and like, I can tell that in a black and white image. Like, this isn't even a HD image.
As postmodernism taught us, it's impossible to escape pop culture, and we shouldn't necessarily want to.
Look at this again.
Young people will continue to study Shakespeare's texts in school, continue to bemoan it while reading SparkNotes in the wee hours of the night, but they'll also never stop watching She's the Man. They'll continue to weep as Kat delivers her poem in 10 Things I Hate About You and repost images of Leo on Tumblr. His language can be difficult to decipher in a contemporary moment. But if you take the language away, you realize Shakespeare's teachings are universal, existing outside of time and space, and can be pretty relatable for young people. We can all resonate at some time or another with Tamara's blinding grief or Hamlet's existential crisis. But beyond that, the endless yearning of Viola in Twelfth Night, or Hal's failure to live up to his...
Also, if you did not know, Lion King was based off of Hamlet too. I found that out, I think, maybe 2 years ago. But yeah, it was based off of, I found it out in high school. So like about 2 years ago. No, that would be 3 years ago. Because I found out near the start of my senior year. But you always, The Lion King was based off of Hamlet because that's how it was pitched to Disney, by saying that it was And I just realized it's going to be a very long video. But yeah, to cut things short, yeah. Lion King was pitched to Disney as a basically like an animal version of Hamlet. So yeah, that's why it's such a such like a different message and stuff like that. And yeah, that stuck around too because literally The Lion King is my favorite Disney movie. So yeah.
Expectations in Henry IV, or the absurd naivete of Romeo and Juliet's romance, are particularly resonant with teens. Remember, his plays were written at a time when kids, as a group, ostensibly didn't have rights. When the idea of a teenager wasn't even a figment of the imagination. And even then, as Stephen Marsh writes, Shakespeare described...
Okay, without any more interruptions in the video, we should be able to get done with this video. Now, I know I made this video pretty long. It was an 18-minute video. I mean, it's an 18-minute video and I made it to like 30 minutes. Did not realize that until, stuff started cutting off and, saying it was taking up too much space. But yeah, let's get back into it.
And so thoroughly that it's only slightly an exaggeration to say that he invented teenagers as we know them today. As kids would say it, Shakespeare was the blueprint, and that's why we continue to study his works and all of their iterations in Western curriculum. But most importantly, Shakespeare was never meant to be high culture. His works were meant to provide audiences with a much-deserved escape while also asking them to join him in ruminating about life's great questions. As of now, these youth pop culture renditions have slowly died out, and more self-serious, albeit magnificent epics have risen in their place. But while no one is denying the beauty and strength of these newer films, I can't help but reminisce on the teen era. It taught us that Shakespeare is for everyone, and I'm excited to see what the next round of pop culture renditions will bring us.
Well, pretty good. Always in all of my reactions, even for me, the original video will be down in the link in the description if you really want to watch that. Because I know I talked a lot in this video. I don't know what just happened. But I felt something. Okay, nothing, I guess. But yeah. Talk to you guys in the next video. This video's been going on for long enough as it is, I guess. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next video, and subscribe to the channel. I want to get 1,000 subscribers by my birthday, September 13th. It'll mean a great deal to me if you subscribe, and yeah, talk to you in the next video, and peace.